Again, thank the Minister for his contribution and for his support of the work of the Standards Council and you and the workforce in particular. I should have said at the start that Marion can't join us today. Marion's got a very bad back injury at the moment, so she's at home tweeting like mad and sending messages to the WhatsApp chain, I think. So if you're on the Twitter feed, and hopefully you will use the Twitter feed and use the hashtags because of CLD and CLDCS Conference 2020, that would be great. And that's also another forum for us to spark discussion. Because of that, we're going to be a wee bit more flexible today than we had intended. You'll be glad to know that I'm not intending to speak between now until 2:10. What we thought we could do is I'll do my input and then have some opportunity for maybe some general questions before we break for coffee, if people are okay with that. You can stick the questions in the chat and we'll do it that way. Is that okay? So if I could start my spiel. When I used to work in a college, this was known as the State of the Union Address or the Queen's Speech, depending on how favourably you viewed hearing the principal talk. So you can choose at the end of the performance which category you want this to go into. I'd like, as everyone has said, this has been a hugely demanding year for all of us and for all of the communities that we serve. But I think though it's been demanding, it's one which has highlighted the important role which CLD plays in supporting both individuals and communities. And there's no doubt that the Minister reflected that in his remarks earlier. But it's clear that it's across the board. It's obvious as well that all three members of the CLD family, adult learning, community development and youth work, have responded with innovation, commitment, enthusiasm in order to ensure that during the pandemic, the communities that we serve and the individuals within those communities that we serve have felt valued and felt that organisations are interested in them and their position. From Orkney to Dumfries and Galloway, from digital youth work to pushing paper worksheets through the letterboxes of adult learners to working with communities to promote health messages, CLD workers have been there. They've been at the forefront of the response to the pandemic and been there as part of the glue that's held communities together. You also have willingly undertaken a whole range of other tasks. I mean, you can't, well, I challenge anyone to be failed to be impressed by the flexibility that people have shown in terms of supporting food banks or delivering food parcels themselves, or supporting out in other situations for which is not necessarily their professional role. That has again demonstrated that we're the workforce that goes that extra mile no matter the circumstances. And that has been appreciated across the board. The number of politicians, civil servants and others within the Scottish community that have made comment on that in a variety of settings is heartening. I think for too often we have been a Cinderella service hidden away, particularly from policymakers and particularly from others who make decisions. And it's been clear this time round that they can't hide away from us as we disclose this now. I'd like to thank you all for your efforts and for demonstrating, I think, importantly, the need for professionally qualified workers in designing and delivering activities while also supporting volunteers in their role. And it's crucial, I think, to emphasise the need for professionally qualified workers. Volunteers are key to what we do and must be supported, but we need people who have that theoretical underpinning to deliver. I'd also like to thank Nicola McAndrew and her team at the Advanced Learning and Science Directorate for all their hard work during the pandemic, particularly how they've worked with colleagues to produce the CLD COVID guidance. That's been really important for us to make sure that the value of CLD is acknowledged across the government, but is also supported by the legal and Scottish and Health Protection Scotland, Public Health Scotland, sorry, approach, and that our guidance is the same as everyone else's and has that credibility. And that's enabled us to make a number of decisions about, for example, starting youth work early, both indoor and outdoor, and making the case to restart adult learning indoors as well. So these are key issues. And again, thanks to that team, and particularly to the colleagues who helped write that guidance. It's more effective because it's been written by practitioners rather than people sitting in a room who don't actually engage with learners. Credit also must be given to the Minister. Richard Lockhead, in his role, has ensured that CLD is considered across the portfolios within the Scottish Government. He's made the case for CLD not only within his own areas of responsibility, but more generally with the Deputy First Minister and in a wider context. And you'll be aware that the Deputy First Minister is responsible for a number of areas across skills and communities, as well as learning. And that has been very important for us. We are now engaged through the Standards Council or through others with a range of groups that previously we were excluded from. The Minister has also ensured that the CLD representation on the Ministerial Tertiary Education Group, which was established to address the issues arising from the pandemic, and the establishment of a CLD leadership group supported by Nicola and her team. And can I just say I'm really grateful for those of you who are members of that CLD leadership group, because it's certainly helped me in the role that I've been asked to do, but it's also helped us move on the agenda in terms of where CLD sits within the context of policy frameworks, but also where CLD sits in terms of influencing decisions made about resources. Richard has argued effectively for the need to develop a cohesive and coherent tertiary education sector on which CLD is a key partner. He routinely reminds universities and colleges and school sectors that we are a key partner, we should be treated as an equal and not something that tags along at the queue's tail. And I think we have to be thankful that for a minister who's prepared to make those comments. As a consequence, as he mentioned in his own presentation, the government's committed to producing a lifelong learning strategy or framework, which will provide an overarching structure for the revised adult learning and youth work strategies. It's likely that all three documents will be published at roughly the same time, and work is ongoing on both these strategies. I understand from feedback from those on the groups that the work has recently been revised. Guidance has changed a little in terms of what people should have been asked to do. Clearly, particularly with the youth work strategy, as I understand it, a lot of work had happened pre-pandemic, and now there's a need to go back and revisit some of the decisions that were made then in light of what the pandemic has forced us to do. And the adult learning strategy, clearly there's work to be done there, and I know that Barry Harrington and the team are moving on in that. This policy initiative, I think, provides the sector with an opportunity to ensure that the Scottish education system post-COVID is not merely another version of what we had before the pandemic. Those of you who kind of follow me on Twitter or kind of heard me speak before is that I have been very critical of where we are in terms of the Scottish educational system. We're currently running a system that wasn't really suitable for the 20th century, and certainly we don't have one for the 21st century. But I think the argument is here that CLD is crucial to the world that people now live in, and the pandemic has emphasised that. The need for people to learn agilely, flexibly, to co-create learning is essential to what we do as CLD practitioners. The skills that we develop, the meta skills that we develop through our CLD practice are central to what people will need to cope with the world that they face. An example of that, the two tragic examples of that today are the collapse of the Arcadia Group and the Topshop Group. There will be thousands of people who will need skills to get jobs. And a number of these people will not necessarily have the skills at the moment for the jobs that are envisaged in the technical side of a green economy. These are people who will have hugely complex, well-developed skills in managing people, problem solving, and working collaboratively, but potentially lack the confidence and the evidence of how these qualifications as they have no qualifications. It's our role to get in there and support that too. And I was talking to a colleague who's working in South Ayrshire recently, who managed to, as she put it, gate crash the PACE team to have a conversation about what the role of CLD is in supporting the ambitions of PACE teams. So that's a key aspect. We should be aware of what's going on in terms of how we deal with that. And for me, I think this is a huge opportunity for us to get a marker down there about how we do this. Equally important, how we get a marker down there and working with young people, and how it's not all about what happens in the classroom. If the pandemic has proved anything, that the over-reliance on examinations to identify and deliver qualifications was more evident at this time. Our work in supporting raising attainment and achievement is key, and we should be proud of that work and be central to it. And again, I think another aspect of what we do in the education system is give communities the capacity to be empowered and engaged. And I think we need to make more of that. It's clear to me that we need to work closely to make sure that community empowerment and participatory budgeting are not things that predominantly middle class people do and do successfully, but we give all our communities the opportunity to hold people like us, professional, middle class professionals, to account for what we do with public money and what services we deliver in their communities. So there's a huge opportunity here for us, and the lifelong learning strategy framework, whatever we're going to call it, gives us an in to make that case, and make that case enthusiastically, importantly. Clearly, as the council, we welcome the policy development. We think it provides further opportunities for us to reinforce the impact that council makes and its members make, and particularly in delivering the Scottish Government agenda. And one thing that we've tried to do as the council over the year is to point out to ministers and other politicians, but at local authority level in particular, and that we need to show that we deliver on the government's agendas. We deliver on creating a more inclusive Scotland. We deliver on alleviating poverty. We deliver on raising attainment and widening achievement and widening access. And we must highlight that. If I can turn to the work of the council now, firstly, I'd like to, on your behalf, thank Marion, Colin, Kirsty, Lorna, Maggie and Willie for all their hard work during the pandemic. Clapping off. The team have produced a number of key policy documents, one of which we'll consider tomorrow. The in-joke within the council is, if you've read the title of the paper, we now call it the chanting paper because there's so much at the start. And we'll maybe have that as a group chant and tomorrow morning at the start of the meeting. We've also produced regular newsletters that have sought to signpost issues around the pandemic, signpost resources, signpost links, all of which I think have been very helpful. And I've worked with colleagues in Education Scotland to deliver webinars. Everything we've tried to do is to support you as members to make the journey through the pandemic as palatable as possible. We are conscious that your health and well-being is as equally important as the health and well-being of the learners that you work with. And we're keen to make sure that you've got support from us to help deliver that. Recently, we've appointed a number of new members to our committees. There was a tremendous response to the call for expressions of interest from a very high quality, and it took some time to agree on the appointments. We actually had to be quite ruthless to get to a cut-off before we considered the candidates, and even then we didn't select everyone. But can I just thank all who put themselves forward, and we're all looking forward to working with our new committee members. Our membership has increased across the country during the pandemic, as has engagement with our social media, and feedback on the newsletter has been very, very positive. Around 1,000 of our members have taken up the free access, which is available to TESS. I think that's important. That was a key ask of you previously, that we gave you access to educational journals. You also have access to the academic libraries of the universities. But our challenge now, as far as TESS is concerned, is a challenge I'm going to throw out to you guys, is we need some articles in there about CLD now. And I know you all do interesting and exciting work that would be of interest to other educational professionals. So I would urge you to think about drafting things and sending them to TESS and get them to get our perspective forward, not only the perspective of secondary, primary and the college sector. The team are currently working on the update of the SVQ youth work and NOS developments, and we need your views. And I know that a call's gone out for your views, particularly in the SVQ youth work. If you could find the time to participate in the structures that Kirsty's set up to do that, we'd be most grateful. That'd be really helpful. Equally important has been the Professional Pathways Report, which mapped out provision for CLD qualifications across Scotland. This has been well received by the providers and by policymakers as providing a coherent overview of the rather complex route map there is to becoming a professionally qualified CLD worker. We're currently, as the Council, working with providers to explore how to develop more effective articulation and progression routes for all those undertaking CLD qualifications. We are aware when we look at our own membership, we have a number of members who have the HNC qualification and are working, and we're seeking to identify means of making sure they can progress to a degree programme. We're also looking at other ways to make sure that all the work that's undertaken to support both professional workers and volunteers is accredited by the Standards Council and has an SCQF rating, so that we can help people build up qualifications in order to move through the stages of registration. We see that as a really important element of the work of the Council going forward. The pandemic has held it up slightly, but the fact that we still got the paper out there and I've started those discussions is really key. In response to a proposal from members, we've established a budding and mentoring scheme, which is intended to provide an opportunity for members to engage in professional discussion, reflection with a colleague out with their employment setting. We thought that was really important for two reasons. One was that in a number of settings, you may be the only professionally qualified worker. If you work for a housing association or another third sector organisation, you may have no one else who has a CLD qualification in your organisation. And the ability to speak to another professionally qualified worker about your work and about their work, we thought was very helpful. We were also conscious that part of this was for newly qualified workers who perhaps wanted to talk to someone who wasn't their line manager or their supervisor about their professional practice. And we recognise that sometimes when you start your career, you don't want to be telling someone you're struggling because it might have an impact on their judgment of you as an individual. Whereas if you spoke to another colleague who could share some of those thoughts with you and give you some pointers on what helped. So we've started that. Feedback to date has been very positive. And if building, hopefully it will be successful and we'll build on that. And it's certainly one thing that we believe could support all of us as we move forward, particularly as we move into the next role of inspection. I know that's kind of quite boring and technical, but for us it gives us greater scope to do things, and you as members, hopefully you'll see the benefit of that as we move forward. And two things in conclusion I'd like to say is that despite the challenges of 2020, the CLD workforce has yet again delivered effectively for communities and individuals by being innovative, proactive, flexible, and equally enthusiastic about its role. You have continually demonstrated the importance of what we do and how we engage and how we co-create activities with those with whom we work. And that is vital, in my view, to create a fairer and more inclusive Scottish society. Without the work that you have done, the consequences of the pandemic, terrible though they are, would have been considerably greater in the communities that we work with. And personally, I would like to thank you again for all your hard work and effort. My final comment's a plea, and this is where I declare an interest. I am a White Ribbon Scotland ambassador, and I'm a board member at White Ribbon Scotland. And as you know, this is the 16 days of action against violence against women. And I would encourage you all, if you haven't already done so, to sign up to the White Ribbon Scotland pledge. It's on their website. And if you're working with groups, particularly if you're working with young men or male groups, that you encourage them and have that discussion with them about violence against women and what we should do to address that. We're aware that the current pandemic, the reporting is that domestic abuse and violence against women has increased. And I think it's very important that we take a step on that. And therefore, I'm abusing my position, I accept, and no doubt Marion will be throwing things at the telly, metaphorically speaking, but I would encourage you to do it. Because I do think it's a key part of what we do. It's about putting those messages out there, being challenging and encouraging people to make a difference to their lives and be positive at making a difference to their lives. Anyway, thank you for listening to me. Happy to take any questions that people have and discussion. And I think we've got 5 minutes, is that right? I've lost my bit of paper with the timing on it.
Yeah, Alan, we've got about 5 minutes or so before we go to the next session. I'm just kind of checking out bits and pieces on the chat, just give you some feedback there. There's some real enthusiasm to find out more about the Buddy and Mentor offer that we've got. So hopefully everyone can come along tomorrow and you will find out more, because we're going to have a presentation on that tomorrow and then a chance for people to discuss and get into the detail of it a wee bit more. Other things on the chat, yeah, from Sheila Campbell saying, you know, really good to hear what you're saying. Lots of other professions believe they deliver community development, and big respect and credibility to volunteers. So, yeah, recognising that. I'll just check in case there's any more. Appreciation for sharing the White Ribbon cause, Alan. So, yeah, we can tell Marion to stop throwing things at the telly, because everyone's great. Any other questions? Anyone want to ask anything in particular about some of the stuff that Alan was speaking about? Either put it in the chat or unmute yourself and feel free. Everybody being shy?
Pat.
Hello, Alan. I'm very new to CLD. I just joined before the pandemic, and I have a 16-year background in learning and development, and before that, social work and community work. I thought you talked about developing the lifelong learning framework and the challenge of that and the need for collaboration. Can I ask you, what do you see as the key competencies that we all need to achieve collaboration?
In my view, and certainly my experience, is that partnership only works when people are honest with each other, honest about their strengths and their weaknesses, honest about what they can actually deliver, and deliver on what they say they're going to deliver.
Thank you very much.
And I think what we've got I think that the difficulty is getting people into that space where admitting that it's harder. In my experience, lots of people go along and just say yes to everything and then fail to deliver, and that hacks off everybody else. It's much better to go to a meeting and say, we're really good at this, but we're absolutely hopeless at that. But I know a person who can deliver on that, and do that sort of engagement. But it's about that, it's about real partnership, not talking about partnership, not pretending that simply because you're in the room with someone having a cup of coffee, it's real delivery. And it's also about sharing both resources and sharing the success and the failure. So for me, those are the key things. And often people are reluctant to do that, but it's time to call it out.
And would you see merit in somebody evaluating that very process in itself, because it could actually throw up some learning models?
Absolutely. And I think that too often success of partnerships is seen on a very superficial level about hitting out hitting outputs rather than outcomes. And what we need to do is focus on, well, how, outputs are really handy, and particularly if you want to run it through a spreadsheet, but ultimately it's about outcomes and what behavioural changes result from effective partnerships. And there are huge examples of it. I mean, I see a former colleague of mine, Brian's in the conference again this year. Brian's moved on to do different things, but he and I both worked on projects where effective partnership working was on that basis of being honest about what you can do and being honest about what you couldn't do, but also owning up when things went badly wrong and accepting your share of the blame rather than just look for credit. So
thank you. Thank you.
So does that take us to coffee? Is that the usual bit? It's like I've spoke before coffee, so it's time for coffee.
I was just going to ask something, because I don't know whether it's been a common problem. I mean, I've actually, you can see me, I've actually been allowed to deliver because I've been in partnership with groups that have been using Zoom. But most of my colleagues have not been allowed to deliver, and I've not been allowed to deliver for one of my jobs for the council because they have not been able in 9 months to agree a platform whereby we can deliver. We're not, for that particular council, we're not allowed to count, we're not allowed to contact students or their carers to see if they're okay. So the work I've been doing with my other groups, where I've been in contact with vulnerable people and checking they're okay, getting food, as well as delivering ESOL and literacy, I can't do, and a lot of the tutors can't do. And there seems to have been a huge lack of flexibility, because to take, 9, 12 months to agree a way of delivering online CLD seems incredible to me.
I think I wholeheartedly agree. And one of the key issues has been about the lack of a comprehensive view of what is acceptable. I mean, again, different councils have different approaches. I think sometimes it depends on who your ICT expert is in terms of what they want. One of the things that we've been arguing from the council and also from the CLD leadership group is we need an agreed systemic approach to what digital learning platforms will be used across Scotland, so that all of us involved in education can use the same platform, learners know what the platform is, and we're all comfortable in that. And in that way, we can create joint materials, we can deliver materials separately, we can move along, we can share experiences with fellow professionals or with learners. So that's part of our argument. The part of the challenge for us as a sector is it's likely that the local government and probably colleges and universities will opt for something like Microsoft Teams, because full-time students at college and university get Microsoft 365 for free. But that's not necessarily available to community groups. What we need to start to do is get a position as to whether that's what we want to do. Certainly, we're arguing that there needs to be a uniform approach to whatever digital platforms used in tertiary education. And we need to think about what that means. Potentially, the joy of working with Microsoft is that you'll know that though he doesn't actually run the company anymore, Bill Gates is very philanthropic and probably is open to an argument about other learners and at least put pressure on the company to give us access. But we need to agree what's best. So there's work to be done there, but it's part of the discussion. We need a view as a sector though on what works. And part of our problem is sometimes is that we don't have a common view, whereas other sectors march up and have a common view. But I agree with you, we need to get a common approach so that learners feel comfortable. And it also makes it easier for learners to move across. So young people can more easily move into what we do. If it's the same platform they use at school, adult learners can move from us into either college or university and then back into us and so on. But, I share your angst. I mean, this week so far, I've been on 2 Zoom meetings, 2 Teams meetings, and a Cisco one. And all of them have different systems and all of them have different functions. and it's just bonkers. But we need a coherent view on it. I agree totally and utterly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just concerned that it's meant we haven't delivered, and also, we haven't delivered for 9 months when students really needed them. But I'd also reflect on the fact that learners on the whole are poorer, and certainly my ESOL learners, and therefore anything that uses lots of data is a problem for them to access.
Absolutely, and we've made that point continually, that digital poverty is the reality for the majority of our learners, both ESOL and other adult learning ones. I was fit to be tied when the announcement was made about computers for young people in schools, rather than the DFM making the announcement which it was supposed to do, which was these were computers that would go to communities and individuals, support young people and for family learning. And I feel that was a huge opportunity missed. And I am led to believe that that's what the DFM wanted to happen, it's just not what came out in the announcement. And we need to keep making that point, is that we need to have resources for the poorest. It's not enough to say X number of students in college and universities have been given laptops when we've got thousands of learners who don't have laptops or don't have access to data. It's not good enough for Vodafone, for example, to say that they're going to offer free data to 16 to 19-year-olds in England who are in college and not offer them to adults. I don't think they made a similar offer in Scotland, but we need to get that message out there that our learners deserve the same access to the digital resource and are less likely to have the disposable income to buy those resources. And it's a key challenge. I mean, and the Scottish Government wants a fairer Scotland, a more inclusive Scotland, a more equal Scotland. We have to keep pushing away our agenda because everyone else does. But we need to be joined up and argue for it coherently across all aspects of it. So if a young person gets a computer, why can't their carer, parents, older siblings use that resource to support their learning? And we need to make that case very clearly.